Hi, I'm Mike with Comp3 Interactive, and today I'm going to show you how to recreate old school RPG style dialogue boxes. Now, let's just jump straight into it. So what do we need to do to get started? First things first, we're going to have to create some of our UI elements. So we'll create a canvas. We'll throw the event system as a child of the canvas just to keep it out of the way. And we'll add a panel for our actual dialog box. We can resize this. Pull that down and then resize there, maybe a little bit taller. And we'll call it dialog box. And now as a child of the dialog box, we can add a Text Mesh Pro element for our speaker's name. Throw that up to the top left. Now for the speaker's name, we're going to want to disable word wrapping. So what that means is if our speaker's name is actually longer than the box, it won't actually wrap down onto the next line. It will just do a continuous single line regardless of the size of the box. So we'll name that to speaker name. Duplicate that and bring it down a little bit, and this will be dialogue. And we'll just make that maybe not that small. We'll make that a little bit smaller than the name. And this time we want to actually enable word wrapping and size up the space where we want our dialogue to be able to fill. Next up, we need an image. I've lost image. Someone show me image. There it is. And image will be for our speaker's sprite. We'll throw that over onto this side, maybe a little bit bigger, 125, 125. We can go even bigger, 140 by 140, that'll do. And then finally, we want to add a button, which we'll use for navigation to the next line of dialogue. And we'll just give that a little symbol to denote that it's going to the next one. And make it a little bit smaller, 30 by 30. And drag this over to the bottom corner. So now we have our basic setup done. We need some scripts. So we'll create a folder called dialog system. And then within that, we need a few different scripts here. We'll need a speaker script, that'll be for the person who's talking. We need a dialogue line script for an individual line of dialogue. We're also going to need a conversation script, which will be an array of dialogue lines associated with this individual conversation that you want to display on screen. And that should be it for now. The last little bit of setting up we'll do is we will take these two UI elements here. Sorry, not UI elements, these are sprites. This one I've created for the border of the dialog box, and this one I found online on opengamer.com. Credit to Charles Gabriel for creating these. I'll put a link in the description for that. This is just one image though. We want each individual face to be its own element. So what we can do, we can amend the sprite mode to be multiple. We'll change pixels to unit to 16 just to keep all UI elements the same. And we'll change this to point no filter. Now what point no filter does is it doesn't try and use anti-aliasing on your images, leaving pixel art a crisp edge. Right, so we've got all that set up. We can apply those and enter the sprite editor. we'll go up here top left to slice by cell count. So we know that we have 6 columns and 2 rows. Slice, and as you can see, each one is now its own individual game item. So we can apply that, and to see that we can expand the faces and see each one is there individually. Next up, the dialog box background. Now this one is going to be a single image. Set that to 16 again, and point no filter again. We can apply that, and this time when we enter the sprite editor, we want to make sure that we can resize our UI elements without losing the quality of our image. Now to do that, we can slice this image up and use different elements of it for different sections. Now I'll show you what I mean here. So we want our border to be, in this instance, 12 pixels from each edge. Now what this is going to do, if we apply it, when we attach this sprite to a UI game object, we can tell it to use sliced rendering, I think is the right word. And it's easier if I just show you. Okay, so we'll take our dialog box, we'll bring our colour all the way up to full opacity, and then the source image, we'll throw in the dialog box border. Now, as you can see, previously, as a standard image, it would have stretched out and looked a complete mess. Now, if we actually select sliced, we can see our corners have been used where they need to be. The middle section has been extended outwards, so now we have a nice looking background. To make the pixels a little smaller though, say change the pixels per unit multiplier by 3. So we're already looking a lot nicer there. And what we can do, we can just throw these names and dialogue a little bit smaller, just so we're not overlapping our UI elements. Fantastic, we're off to a good start. Now we can start creating our scripts. So first up, we'll create a speaker class. Let's open this up in Visual Studio. Okay, so now our speaker class is open in Visual Studio. We can get rid of our start and update methods, we won't be needing those, and we can also get rid of the 2 system namespaces. Now the speaker item itself, we don't want to attach this to a game object. We want this to be an independent script that we can duplicate and create multiple instances of. Now to do that, we can no longer inherit from mono behavior, but instead we can inherit from scriptable object, and you'll see why this is useful very soon. One good thing that you can do for this is we can create an asset menu, and I'll show you what an asset menu is in a second. So we'll create it with the new file name of new speaker, and the menu name we'll have as dialog/new speaker. Now when we format it like this, dialog/, this will create a folder structure. So we'll have a folder called dialog, and within the folder we'll be able to create a new speaker. So what do we need within a speaker class? First of all, we need a private string of the speaker's name, and also a private sprite of the speaker's sprite. Now because these are private, because we don't want to be able to directly edit them through our script, we just want to be able to read them, but we still need to populate them in the inspector. So to do this, we can tag these with serialize field, and although they're private, that will allow us to edit these within the inspector. But now, because they're private, we can't directly access them to read them. So we're going to need to create a few methods. First of which is a public string of getName, and that will just simply return the speaker's name. And secondly, we need a public sprite getSprite, which will return the speaker's sprite. It's as simple as that, and that one is now a speaker class completed. Next up, we'll create a dialog line class. Again, we can remove the start and update functions, we won't be needing those, and the system. Now, this time, we still don't want to inherit from mono behavior, but we also don't want this to be a scriptable object. This is just going to be a generic class. But we do want to be able to edit this again in the inspector. So this time, we'll tag the class with system.serializable. That will display any fields that we have within this class inside the inspector. So what do we need inside our dialog line class? Well, we need a public speaker and a public string dialog. So that will be who's currently speaking and the information, such as the name and the sprite, and then the dialog is the actual text that they're going to be speaking. Now, we can tag this with text area to give ourselves a little bit more room in the inspector when we're creating our conversations. And again, simple as that, dialog line complete. Third and finally, for the utility scripts, we'll create conversation. Again, we don't need start and update, and again, we don't need system.collections and system.collections generic. We want to, again, inherit from scriptable object, and again, we want to create a new asset menu with the file name, new conversation, and the menu name of dialog / new conversation. Spelt that ridiculously wrong. Conversation. So now in our folder structure we'll have dialog new conversation and also dialog new speaker. Now within our conversation we of course need some dialog lines, so we'll make a dialog line array called all lines, and then we need some public methods to access this. Again, we're going to need to serialize the field. I cannot spell. Right, we can serialize the dialog lines, so we can edit them in the inspector, as I've said before. Now we can create a public dialog line get line by index, and we'll pass in an index. Now what we can do with this is we can reference a dialog lines array but only return the one that we're interested in. To do this we will return all lines but only return the index that we pass in. And finally we want a public integer get length, so we can determine how long our conversation is. Now if we simply do return all lines dot length, that's fine, but what length will do is it will always return one more than its index of value. For example, if your conversation had 3 lines, you would have a dialog line array of a length of 3. But the way that we need it we need to make sure that we always return the final indexer as the length. So dialog lines will be index 0, 1 and 2. So we can return the length minus 1, which would then return 2 as opposed to 3. Now I hope that made sense. As I was saying it, I was confusing myself a little bit, but when we actually use getLength, hopefully you'll see where that comes in handy. And now that's our conversation class complete. Now that we have all our utility scripts and elements set up, we can get into... Okay, I'll show you a little tip actually before we start the conversation manager. As you can see here, we have some warning messages telling us that we've got some fields that are never assigned, so will always be null. These are private serialized fields. Now we don't want to assign them in the script, but we do want to assign them in the inspector. So a way around this, to get rid of those warnings, at the top of our class we can add hash pragma warning, which one is it? Warning disable, and then the warning that we want to disable is this number here. So we've got warning CS0649. So we can put 0649 in there, and we're also getting the warning inside of our conversation, so we can copy that into there as well. And when we go back to Unity, we can see that our warnings have been suppressed and no longer appear in the console window. And that's a good place to leave it for today. Make sure you check out the second part of this video where we put all this together, we create our dialogue manager, and we get our characters speaking. Make sure you follow us on Facebook and Instagram. That's comp3.interactive on both platforms. I've been Mike from Comp3 Interactive. I'll see you again soon.